Look, man, we're coming up to you.
Well, there's no one here yet, and the floor is completely engulfed. We're on the floor, and we can't breathe.
Okay.
And it's very, very, very hot.
And you've got to make it stop, and you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers.
Freedoms, access, information, truth, theory, conjecture, debate, discussion. Are these words that inspire you? Well, then welcome to Revolution Radio, where we search and help you search for the truth. We shall not be deterred. We shall stand tall. We stand together to fight against the attempted destruction of mankind from forces we cannot see. We must prevail. We are commercial free, and we are 100% listener and user supported. We are here for you, so stay tuned and prepare to be awoken.
We are live. Welcome to another installment of Phenomenal E.Ts here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I am your host, Tim Dalger. Tonight we have a very special guest, Ralph Ring, his website, bluestarenterprise.com. Ralph is a retired locksmith of 35 years, a professional diver, also a natural scientist and a creative technician who in the late 50s and early 60s worked alongside Otis T. Carr, a protege of Nikola Tesla, investigating alternative technologies, one of which was teleportation. Ralph and two other men took part in a test piloting a man-made spaceship, which we will most certainly discuss. Some of his work has been featured on History Channel's UFO Hunters, dealing with resonant frequency and natural law. Ralph has really excelled in what he believes is a better and safer form of transportation. Blue Star Enterprise is devoted and dedicated to bringing about a more peaceful, expedient, and affordable way of life through the use of alternative energy, and much, much more that we will get into. It is my pleasure to introduce Ralph Ring. How are you this evening?
I'm just fine, Tim. How are you?
Well, very good, very good. I scrubbed behind the ears for this one, I'll tell you that much.
Okay, well...
Great. Well, other than what I've mentioned, please introduce Ralph Ring to our audience.
Okay, this is Ralph Ring. I'm here with my lovely lady and wife, Marcia, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity to get some more word out about what's going on in the way of alternatives, what is being done, what hasn't been done, and what is going to happen.
Very well. Well, what I've done is I've lined up some questions if you want to get into them. We have a wonderful chat room here that I'm surely they're going to be posting questions for yourself. Well, we can get right into the questions if you'd like.
Sure. That might be a good way to start, and then if you can think of anything, why, I'll be glad to cover it for you.
Well, we're going to talk about that spaceship adventure, if you don't mind. We'll get into that. All right. Okay. So Nikola Tesla theorized inventions of creating a flying machine without the use of airplane engine or onboard fuel source, instead using electromagnetism, natural levitation. Can you explain what that is for those unfamiliar with the concept?
Well, there's been all types of energy that we've used. You know, there's basically, I guess, about 4 different types of energy. There's thermal, there's light as energy, and there's also, it all comes from magnetism. Magnetism is the core of all energy. And when you can go directly to the source, directly to the core, and understand how energy moves through time and space, then you start adapting and finding ways to use it without, telephone poles and copper wires, etc. So our source is, when I worked with Otis Carr, our source was magnetism. I got into it by all my life. I thought of floating homes, if you will, of having homes that would both be our transportation and our habitation, so that we could go anywhere with complete comfort and have everything we need on board. And I eventually, in my life, after a few years, met Otis Carr. I worked for the government. I was in a research and development lab working with magnetism. And then I met Otis Carr, who wanted to build spaceships. So we eventually got together, and that's what we did. You probably want a little bit about my background. I was raised in the woods. This is where all the good information comes from, is from nature. And I got very heavily into understanding what natural law was. And in essence, it's the understanding of cause and effect, or what goes around comes around, etc. It's very, very simple, the natural laws. But I was raised up here in where I'm living now, in a place called Paradise, California. It's very, very nicely wooded wilderness area. And my sister and I used to walk back and forth to school 7 miles every day, 3.5 each way. And on our journey back and forth, we learned what nature was doing and how she was doing it. And when I got out into the world later on in life, I found out that things seemed to be backwards. Everybody seemed to be doing things the hard way. So if you've got some questions, pertinent or direct questions, I'll be glad to answer them, or I can just go on and build it up to when I worked with Carr.
Just take the air. Keep going with what your thoughts are there. Okay.
Well, some of the things that I'm going to be getting into are probably new and unfamiliar to many people, because you don't find them in textbooks very often. Although within the last 4 or 5 years, things have changed with the advent of understanding and using quantum mechanics and quantum physics. People are beginning to see that there's more to life than they ever realized. And so part of what I'm going to say deals with consciousness, to be consciously aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and what we can do to make it better. So I'll go back to my childhood here in Paradise, California. I grew up and graduated from the 8th grade in the middle of the woods, one-room schoolhouse, no electricity, no water. We had outhouses. But we had a very good teacher. She would relate to us about the simple principles of life through nature. We'd go out on excursions and exploratory adventure walks. And so together we learned quite a bit about natural law. I eventually left the woods, the comfort of the woods, to get out in the world to see what it's about, and I did eventually get most of the way around the world and got into different cultures and different ideas and so forth. But I found that they were all seemed to be at a place of just kind of revolving instead of evolving. They were going around in circles on some of their concepts, meaning that things like the combustion engine, which is really really now becoming very, very antiquated way of transportation, and the fuel that they're using, which is fossil fuel, taking causing a great deal of problems now with the emissions and the carbon, et cetera, that are causing a lot of different problems and getting very, very expensive for people to maintain. So anyway, let's see, where can I go from here? I went into the service and I went through boot camp in Fort Ord, California, and went on to Guam. And when the Korean War broke out, we were the first ones to land, the first Army battalions to land on the north shores of Korea, which we made the Wonchon landing. And that was quite an experience. It was war, and I learned what atrocities that we can do to each other through, maiming and disabling and killing each other. It just didn't make any sense to me. So I got wounded several times and found that it wasn't fun at all, and it was very, very cold over there. It was at times 70 degrees below zero, and it was very, very cold, very hard to operate. Anyway, I eventually got back to the States, and incidentally, the outfit that I was with was the 3rd Division, 7th Regimental Combat Team, which dealt with heavy weapons. There was heavy mortars, heavy artillery, and heavy machine guns. And I kept putting in all through my time in the service for engineering school, and was always somehow put back in the infantry. So I never really got the schooling that I wanted to become an engineer. I studied the natural laws from a more expansive level. But I got back to the States and found that there weren't many jobs available for heavy weapons operators.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know where I was going to go with my life. I'd done some diving on Guam. I loved to skin dive and later scuba dive. And so I thought, well, maybe I can try and put a little business together, which I did. I created Skin Divers Inc., Skin Divers Incorporated in San Francisco, California. And that was in the early 50s. And that went well enough to support me and later foster my further research and alternatives. And let's see, I moved down the coast to where my family was. They lived in Newport Beach, California. Excuse me. And I continued to dive, and I was approached by the U.S. Divers Corporation because they'd heard about my diving and some of my exploits, and asked me if I'd be interested in joining the team with them as a research and development diver. So I thought about it and said, well, yeah, that would be a great idea. Be a steady paycheck anyway. Well, in the interim, I met my first wife and had 2 children. And I'm kind of skipping forward here. Anytime you want me to go back and elaborate, I'll be glad to. And I'm trying to fit the pieces all in here.
Like you haven't already, a lot of interviews you've done, no doubt.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I started working for U.S. Divers. I was in the R&D department. I met Jacques Cousteau, and I felt really, really, this was a beautiful man. He understood the laws of nature very, very keenly, and his interest lied in the underwater world, and we became very, very good friends and explored the underwater world when he was there. He was always traveling, so I didn't get to see him very much. But anyway, I had a good relationship with him. In my work as a research diver, they took me out to the islands, Catalina Islands and so forth, for diving experiments. I was working on a wraparound mask at the time, and my job was to get the distortion out of the mask, and so which I did eventually. But I had to stay away from home quite a bit, both in my onshore job and my offshore job. My wife at the time felt that she needed somebody to keep taking the trash out and take care of the kids once in a while, and she didn't really, and after I'd had a couple of close calls, she really didn't want me to continue my exploits with U.S. divers. So, long story short, she introduced me to a newspaper ad that was advertising for a laboratory technician at a place called Advanced Kinetics in Costa Mesa, California. And I said, well, I don't really have that much of a background. I'm, ex-machine gunner and so forth, and diver. And she pointed out that on my personal level, I was constantly running experiments. I had things running all over the house on remote controls and so forth. So she said, well, you were using all these things, these gadgets around here, and using natural law. Go down and try and sell yourself a job on what you do know. Well, I didn't think I was going to get very far, but nature has a way of when you really get close to her, she kind of guides you to where it feels good. And if it doesn't feel good, you kind of move on. Yeah. And the diving situation was becoming, at least to my wife and my kids, very, very uncomfortable. So I went down and I got to Advanced Kinetics sometime in the early morning. I think it was, pretty close to 12 o'clock. And there was nobody there. There was no host. There was nobody at the receptionist desk. So I was walking down the hall saying hello, hello, trying to find a place to put in an application for a job. And nobody was there. So I walked by the director's office. He happened to have his door open. His name was Dr. Weinhardt. He asked me, what are you doing? And I told him I was looking for a job. And he said, well, you're going to have to come back. They're all out to lunch. You want to come back later. And I said, okay. So I started on down the hall, and he said, well, wait a minute, what do you do? Are you an engineer or what? And I said, no, I'm applying for the lab tech job. I feel I can probably handle that. I've had a lot of experience in my own research and development, and I love natural law. I love magnetism, and believe that the fuel that we should be using forever is magnetism. Well, that caught his eye and his ear because he had just apparently lost an engineer that was working on a magnetic experiment that they had, and he said that they needed to fill that position, and that I could just. He invited one of the supervisors to come and get me and take me out to the experiment and put me to work. And I said, well, I haven't even filled out an application or anything yet. I mean, they didn't seem to worry about that. Said, no, we'll get that later. Don't worry about that. Just go to work on this. And he says, it's rather simple. You don't have a lot of problems with it, but we need to get cracking on it because that's where we get our funds when things are in motion. So I said, well, okay, what do you got? And they had a giant oscilloscope and giant Polaroid camera, and they set up a magnetic field, a big magnet really, and they were firing with a cathode ray, they were firing electrons through a magnetic field, and they said, now your job is to find a way we can get through that field without deflection. We don't want this little guy going to the positive or negative. We want him to get through this field. And the object was to find ways to get through magnetic rivers of space for space flight, so that there are many, many eddy currents and vortices in space that need to be traversed. And if you don't understand magnetism, you're not going to get anywhere. So I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. I'll get it through there for you. Well, I started working on the experiment, and it wasn't very long till I realized that it was never going to happen the way they were doing it. They were using brute force because they had ways of, increasing the Gauss, increasing the field, and
did you get another call?
Yeah, I'm just getting her to. I'm getting my wife to handle that for us here. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, she blipped them off. So let's see, where was I? So anyway, I realized, and they kept telling me, "Oh, we got Boulder Dam behind us. You got plenty of power, so just keep increasing the force and get these electrons through there." And I said, "Well, you're never going to do it that way." And they didn't want to hear me, so I thought, well, this is going to be a very boring job unless I find a way to make it productive. So I thought about it, and the next bench over for me, they were working on levitation, and they had these steel coils that they checked out of supply, and they burn up about every 5 or 10 minutes. They seem to be burning up another coil, trying to levitate a steel ball for about 3 or 4 minutes, and they weren't getting anywhere. And these jobs were getting very, very costly. I mean, my job alone was in thousands of dollars a day, just doing nothing but taking Polaroid pictures and writing them up and actually not getting anywhere. So I thought, well, I'll just go home and sleep on this. I think I can come up with a better idea for me and also for this levitation device, because I fooled around with levitation before. So anyway, I went home, and my lab at the time, I had a small 3-bedroom home, but it was small and cramped, so my main lab seemed to wind up on the living room floor. As far as my wife was concerned, it wasn't really suitable, but I tore apart a television, got a cathode ray tube out, and set up another experiment with the magnetic field, big magnets, and got it all set up to go. And I remembered as a kid, and here in Paradise, that I used to watch the water come down the hill from the snow, and along with it being completely refreshed in just a couple of feet, where you could drink it even if there was a log stuck in it, in the water, it would clear the water up in just a few feet and be drinkable. It was also meandering. It wasn't coming down in a straight line. It was always going back and forth, and it was always bubbling and creating negative ions, etc. So I thought, well, I'll just pulse the signal. I'll just use a vortexual motion and spiral this little guy through the field and see what happens, which I did. And the first shot was totally successful. I got through the field with no deflection. And I didn't dream that I would do it the first time, but I did. So I went on and got about, I think, close to 20 other shots, all successful, right through the field. And I thought, well, that's enough to perhaps get a raise. I'll write this one up and take pictures of it and take it in to the boss, Dr. Weinhardt, and see what he had to say about it. And I thought it was quite simple. It was just pulsing the signal is what we breathe. You can't just breathe one way. You got to breathe in and out. nothing in nature goes just one direction at a time. It's always moving in counter direction simultaneously. So the other levitation thing, I had a 15-inch woofer speaker, and I put it on the floor on its backside, and hooked up an audio amplifier or frequency generator, I'm not sure, that I picked up at a garage sale, and fooled around with that for quite a while until I found that I could levitate a ping pong ball, and it got to be quite late at night, and finally I said, well, I'll get it in the morning. I thought, well, I'll start over, but I went to bed and I woke up and the ping pong ball was still levitating. So I thought, well, it might be acoustical, and I remember seeing an 8mm film one time of the Tibetans levitating rocks up the side of cliffs using big horns and drums that created resonant frequencies of the stones, and were able to levitate them at the sides of the hill. So I said, well, this is great. I got maybe I'll get a double raise, or maybe I'll get a promotion or some dumb thing. So I wrote it up. I wrote both experiments up. I took pictures and went in really, really kind of on the cocky side, because I thought for sure I was going to get somewhere. And I got into Dr. Weinheit's office and showed him what I did. I told him, I said, well, it's really quite simple. I'm not an engineer, and I don't know much about academia, but I do know natural law. And these are both very simple principles. And he says, okay, I'll take a look at them. And he saw them, and he says, he was shocked. He says, I never thought you'd get that far. He says, I know how simple that is. I know that. But I can't allow you to continue. And there's nothing we can do with either one of these. And I said, why? He says, well, there's something you really don't understand, Ralph, that we're a government-funded research and development lab, and we're paid to look for answers, not necessarily find them. And that just blew my socks off. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I thought I was here to do some productive work that was going to get us somewhere.
Yeah, they didn't want to hear.
Yeah. He wanted to go around in circles, and I said, well, you're never going to get anywhere forcing that. And he says, well, the money rolling in, we're looking for answers. So go back to work, give you, your pay envelope will increase, but don't talk to any of the engineers. Don't even talk about this to anybody. Just go back to work, and we'll give you quite a bit more money, but just keep doing what you were doing. Well, that was it was too late then. I had already become bored with the experiment and realized it wasn't going to go anywhere. So I lasted till the next paycheck or two, and then I decided I just couldn't go there anymore. And I really had tears in my eyes when I left. I just walked off and left the job, and I realized that I was working for an outfit that didn't really want to go anywhere, and I did. So that didn't set too well with my wife when I got home, and we had some discussions on paychecks and so forth. But one of my neighbors was pretty sharp. We used to talk amateur science together and stuff, and he said, he belonged to a group called Understanding. That was the name of the group. This was in Costa Mesa. And a guy by the name of Daniel Fry created the group for people to come together with odd or different or far out ideas and discuss them and see what we could put together, and then try to introduce these ideas to the mainstream and see if we could get somewhere with them. So I said, well, okay, my interest is floating homes. I want to see, take the fire from ruining the garden, putting down cement and asphalt and running the rubber and polluting the air with it. I'd like to see the tire from a vertical position go into a horizontal and build spaceships. I didn't call them spaceships then. I called them hovercraft because
that's what you're doing.
Spaceships in those days, from my position, was almost a taboo. They just didn't want to, hear anything I had to say. They figured that was on a professional level, not an amateur level. But anyway, I got into the group and we discussed it and told them my interest in magnetics and that that's what I wanted to do. And they said, well, at that time there was a person named Otis Carr that was in Norman, Oklahoma, that was having trouble building spaceships. He wanted to get them off the ground. And he was trying to prove his point. And he was running into quite a bit of flack from people. They didn't want this to happen because he was advocating free and abundant energy to operate these things. He was talking about consciousness and teleportation and everything. And his teacher, his mentor, was Nikola Tesla. He worked with Tesla for about 3 years. And Tesla lived in multi-dimensional consciousness. He was really way ahead of his time on many levels. And so I thought, well, gee, I'd like to meet the guy. And he said, well, coincidentally, he's run into enough trouble back there where he needs some help. So we're going to send for him and his entourage to come out here and meet you. You guys get together and see what you can come up with.
Incredible.
So eventually that happened. They sent for him and his entourage. It was about 8 people. They came out and they put us up. And one of the people there had a big lodge, a big cabin up at Lake Arrowhead, and they put us up in the cabin. And said, well, we've got to find a place for you guys to work, to get together. Well, that gave me, it was about 2 weeks, I guess. I'm not sure how long we were up there, but it gave me enough time to really sit down and talk with Carr. And I found that I was talking 24/7 with this guy. He was just had outrageous dreams and concepts of how the simplicities of life are, and which I've had a dose of when I was growing up, and that he wanted to see that everybody had a crack at life, not just a few. And he wanted to create ideas with alternatives to make it possible they could create their own, be their own energy company, putting a device in their home where they can produce their own electricity and not worry about wires and telephone poles and so forth. And he really wanted to see spaceships happen. So then I said, well, that's me. I'd like to work with you. So he said, well, there's third-dimensional nuts and bolts devices where we're at right now. We've got moving parts. We have counter-rotating wheels that produces tremendous magnetic field. Have an accumulator for the centerpiece. It's called the Utron, which is not a generator. And a lot of people have assumed that that's what I've been talking about, but it is not. An accumulator accumulates energy, stores it, and then distributes it when needed as electricity, et cetera, et cetera. So he was saying that this accumulator works on magnetism, and when we got into understanding the laws of magnetism together, and sacred geometry, because everything, when you get into magnetic understanding, everything has to be follow certain vortices, certain lines and vortexes of what's called or referred to as time and space. Actually, it's really beyond time and space, because time and space is a creation of mankind. It really doesn't exist in the ethers. And the ethers is what he was referring to. And he said that Tesla had taught him that we live in a third-dimensional concept that is very limited, very, very growth limitations to life, that there were many, many more dimensions that can be explored and can be comfortably introduced to people, where they can raise their consciousness and enjoy much more abundance of the gifts that nature's given us. So he said that the use of consciousness, of getting people to wake up, is his greatest. It's always been his greatest foe, if you will, as was Tesla, because Tesla, when he got so far with his projects, was getting ready. He had already produced electricity going through the earth, around the earth, through the air, without the use of any wires or telephone poles, etc. And was building a tower. He built a tower in Wardenclyffe, north of New Jersey, or in Manhattan, I think it was. And he was backed by J.P. Morgan, who was the money bags of the time, which later is and has become, Chase Bank. Anyway, he had got so far, and he was producing many, many things. The radio, the Marconi claimed the first radio, but actually it was Tesla. And there was many inventions that Tesla worked with. He worked with Edison and Westinghouse both. With Westinghouse, the Niagara Falls, the dynamos, is all Tesla technology was put in there, using these dynamos to create and power people's homes and so forth, which he said is really not necessary because we can go wireless with all this stuff. But when he got close to that technology, which he called ether technology, the money people got worried because there didn't seem to be a lot of money selling energy anymore if you had free and abundant energy. So Morgan, after a long conversation with Tesla and building him, helping him build the giant coil, big Tesla coil, to distribute energy for infinite distances around the globe and so forth. Morgan Morgan
it's okay.
pulled the plug. And he told him, you're going to have to pull all this. We got copper mills, we got the lumber industry. You're going to destroy everybody. You're really becoming an outlaw here, Tesla. You can't do this. We need the money. We need to keep this monetary system alive and well. And Tesla said, well, no, with the advent of free and abundant energy for everybody, you don't have to have a bunch of slaves doing all the work. You can have very creative people that have come here to do wonderful things for this little planet, that you free them of the worry of making the payment at the end of the month or getting their electricity cut off. If they didn't have to worry about that, they could start thinking and feeling and creating through their imaging or their imagination, creating greater things, greater artists, greater machinists, greater anything they wanted to be, would be far in advance of what we have. Well, Morgan didn't want to hear this, and he just said, "No, we're gonna have to pull your plug. We don't want to go there." And Edison kind of sided with Morgan. I got all this information firsthand from Carr because he'd worked with Tesla, and I'll tell you about that as well here in a minute. But trying to fit it in. Anyway, let's see. Westinghouse really liked Tesla, and they worked together very well. But Edison almost became an adversary. He just didn't care much for Tesla technology. He wanted a DC current, and Tesla was advocating alternating current, understanding more about how electricity moves through the ethers, through the energies of space. So they eventually pulled the plug on Tesla. They stopped him, and Carr at the time was working as a clerk, a desk clerk in a New Yorker hotel, and he got acquainted with Tesla. Tesla lived there, and he used to send down to get peanuts. Tesla loved birds, and especially pigeons and so forth. So he'd have Carr running for bird food all the time. And Carr decided to, try to open Tesla up and talk to him about what he was doing and how he was doing it. And Carr he had an open mind, completely, totally open mind. And so they got together. Tesla decided to teach him everything he could, because he said that he was being shut down, and you better take it and run with it and try and get it done in your time, or if you don't make it, keep passing it on, because sometime soon, within the next 100 or 2 years, they're going to run into a dead end, and you're going to have to be there to bail them out with free and abundant energy, because that's the only way that the survival of the species is going to work. So they got together, and I guess day and night he worked with Tesla, and that went on for quite a while, for about 3 years. Alternately, Carr started a small laboratory and eventually created OTC Enterprise, which is a larger research and development laboratory, and I think the main base of that was in Baltimore, Maryland. And so Carr decided to take the ether technology and build spaceships. And the offspring of that would be small devices using the Utron and the accumulator again to make small devices that people could put in their homes, and running with an aerial 30 feet in the air and 30 feet in the ground could produce their own electricity. Well, the opposition to this has been ferocious. People that have a lot of money that invested in fossil fuels and energy and so forth just don't want to see this technology happen. So that brings him back to where he was and where I was. I was in California. He was in Norman, Oklahoma, building small prototypes. He'd gone to the patent office with a patent, but he had levitation in the patent. And they said, no, we don't want to hear levitation and resonant frequencies and vibrations. We don't want to hear that in your patent. We can't give you a patent on what you've got here. And he says, well, I've got working prototypes. He said, no, we can't give you a patent. You pull the levitation ideas out, and we'll give you a patent on an amusement device. And so he fought with them, and finally he said, well, it's probably better than nothing. We can start with at least a visible idea of what we're trying to do, and then take it from there, which he did. And he produced. He was producing prototypes in his Baltimore laboratory, and there's a lot of details I don't know, but the things that he was telling me, that they were experimenting with different devices. At one time he had two moving parts, eventually, two actually capacitors inside the craft rotating around this Utron. And they were using mercury at one point, and the seams of the outer part of the craft, because of the pressure that the rotating, counter-rotating wheels produced, split apart, and the mercury went all over the lab and got got all over Carr, and he was in the hospital for quite a while with kind of I guess it was mercury poisoning. I'm not sure what the diagnosis was. But anyway, they were trying to stop him by creating the idea that he was a fraud and trying to get money from people on a scam and so forth. And so it was perfect timing when the people in California decided to invite him to come out. And so he came out, and I met the other guys. Beautiful pack of guys. There was a few engineers. I think we had a physicist and can't remember all the names right now, but there's Dennis Ripoli and Wayne Aho. And Wayne Aho was an ex-military officer that dealt with Project Blue Book, UFOs, in the service, and he said he tried to get the truth out to people, and they kept stopping him from going there. And so he got out of the service and decided he gravitated towards the group that was OTC Enterprise, and decided to become our PR man. So we.
Well, how about you take a break right there and I'll wet your whistle there.
Okay.
I just want to let our listeners know freedomslips.com is the website. Revolution Radio is what you're listening to here. Phenomenal E.Ts with your host, Tim Dolger. We are speaking with Ralph Ring of BlueStarEnterprise.com. You can go ahead and visit his site. And right after you do, come and visit freedomslips.com. We've got a wonderful chat room here filled with like-minded people. You'll have a really great time. I promise you that. And we are going till 10 p.m. until the market report at 10 p.m. and then 10:30. Dave Corso comes on. So it's a filled night right up till midnight. And then overnights are coming back to us. So midnights with Joey Diamond and I believe we'll just call it special guest because I don't want to confirm who it is yet. But Joey will be on at midnight. So look forward to that. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, like I said, is the website. Ralph Ring, my guest here. I gotta say, very, very, like I said, very packed first part of the show. I definitely want to thank you for that. It gets our listeners into what you're all about, and you've touched on some of the questions we've had come into the chat room because I've been asking our chatters anything that's on their mind, anything that they want to bring to the table. I'm going to copy and paste, so we do have those questions filled up for you there, Ralph. So if you do, we can get on with the questions.
Oh, that sounds good, because I don't know where to go with this, and the questions help, because then I can zero in on any level you'd like to go.
Great.
The main topic that will eventually, before we get too far into teleportation and so forth, is consciousness. That people have to be consciously aware of something before they can see the value in it. So a lot of the time I spent with Gar and his entourage was conscious raising. We got into the real fundamental laws of nature and understood how they worked and operated. So that being said, I welcome questions right now.
Great. Perfect. Okay. I have a couple scrounged up. Okay. Now, you did speak about resonant frequencies, but if you can explain specifically what are resonant frequencies, and do bumblebees really levitate?
Thank you. That's an easy one.
Good.
Okay, well, when I graduated from the 8th grade and then bounced around through high school and wound up I was in Santa Cruz High in Santa Cruz, California, when on the second floor when the science teacher was explaining to us that bumblebees couldn't fly. He said, no, aerodynamically they can't fly. There's no such thing. And I was looking out the window and there was a bumblebee staring me in the face. So I said, well, one of you guys has got to tell me how this is happening, because I'm not getting anywhere. I'm at a standstill. And I decided at that point to go back to nature and start looking into things myself, because as far as our teacher was concerned, it can't happen. Bumblebees can't fly. So I took off and did a lot more research and so forth. I eventually later on, I ran into Wayne Aho's brother, his name was Arthur Aho, and he wrote a book, I believe it's in the Library of Congress, called Tomorrow's Energy Need Not Be Fuel. And I explained to him about the bumblebee incident, and he said, well, no, you've got to give credit to the teacher. That's all he knew. That's as far as they go. And he was absolutely right. Aerodynamically, they don't fly. And I said, well, what are they doing then? And he said, well, they levitate. So I said, could you explain that? And he said, sure. He says, next to their larynx, there's a little, like a hollow cavity, a little tube. And when they beat their wings and they reach the resonant frequencies of their surroundings, they nullify what's called gravity and create their own force field. So that being done, they're a free agent to move about anywhere they want in complete comfort in their own magnetic field. So that I was working with resonance and didn't know about it. I understood that, resonance from the acoustical levitation experiments that I had produced, and I had put crystal goblets in front of speakers and busted them by reaching a high speed. It would break the crystals by reaching the resonant frequencies. So what that means, in essence, is everything is vibrating at certain rates, certain frequencies, certain rates, certain dimensions of time, what we call time and space. And when you want to move something, you simply resonate and get to that resonant frequency of what you're trying to move, and then you synergize with that. The energy becomes one, because that's really all we really are, is just energy. We and this might be a hard one now, but this is also true. We are not who we think we are. We think we're just flesh and bone, physical human beings, and we're much, much, much more than that. We're actually gods by comparison, because we're composed of infinite energy. And when you understand that, and you know who and what you are, that you are a creative being and you can use your imagination to create anything you want, it deals with resonant frequencies. You simply, let's see if I can think of an example. Marcia, can you help me with an example?
Well, explain about the tennis ball. How was the tennis ball able to levitate, and what energy did it use?
Well, that was a simple one. That's just acoustical energy. That's just sound waves. You can do this. There are many, many versions of levitation. That being one.
Okay. The
sound waves. Once, because of you have a sphere, which is a complete circle, and the speaker being a parabolic, throwing sound up towards the sphere, simply reaches the resonant frequency of the ping pong ball. It was a ping pong ball, not a tennis ball.
Yeah, sorry, I do apologize.
No, and then it levitates.
Yeah.
You can. There's different forms. You can take a hairdryer and levitate a ping pong ball. Just put a ping pong ball up in the air with a hairdryer underneath it, and it's levitating. Levitation is quite simple, but it's outlawed in our system of science. We go as far as the first and second laws of physics. The second law being you can't get out of something more than you put into it, which is absolutely, totally erroneous, because nature does it every day.
Exactly. It's an abundance.
In levitation, the way I can explain it, I think, for people to understand easier, is you can look up at a blue sky, and there's really nothing there, apparently, until the temperatures start to change. And then all of a sudden you see little wisps of vapors. Nature's actually drawing together the moisture in the air and putting it into what we call clouds, and starting then to store energy in huge and vast amounts. I mean, hundreds of thousands of tons of water are suspended right over our heads, and by natural levitation. And then when the signal's given by the arid areas of the world or something that needs to be watered, nature lets go and rains. It just pours. Lets all that out. So it's not it's something we're not used to. That's all. It happens a lot. People with Marcia and I belong to a choir, and we sing for the Paradise Choir in Paradise. And there are some singers in there that can reach a high C and hold it for moments. And when that happens, the glass on the windows start to rattle. It starts to shake. And that again is resonant frequency. You're starting to get close to the resonant frequency, like the bumblebee. And can you think of something, Marcia?
Like two strings of a guitar resonate with a frequency. I mean, frequency is in everything. Since we're all energy, we have different frequencies. When we're sweeping the floor, there's a different frequency of our energy being dispensed.
It's like two tuning forks, or you can have one tuning fork in the key of C and the other in the key of F, and nothing will happen. You can think it all day long and nothing happens. But you get two tuning forks in the same key, and it can be as far away as quite a ways apart, depending on how hard you strike the tuning fork, and it will vibrate and resonate with the other tuning fork. And it could be, a block away or even further. It depends on how much strength you put into the experiment.
Very well. How about another question here? Your website, bluestarenterprise.com, is very interesting, user-friendly, filled with videos, audio, articles, and even a members section. You are very dedicated to keeping an open mind, an open forum, and discussion about alternative technologies. Thank you very much, by the way, for your continued efforts. But the question, in your opinion, why have the powers that be not picked up on this technology and made it available on a global market?
Well, in a simple explanation, I might say that if we spend our life learning that we're supposed to compete and grow and build a dynamo of ourselves and a business, and we do so by investing our time and money into projects that seem to be useful, like fossil fuels, it becomes a conglomerate. It becomes very, very large in scope, global in scope, if you will, when it comes to oil. So when you're pumping and selling oil and somebody comes up with an idea, they say, you don't need that anymore. We can show you magnetism will get you anywhere because it's inexhaustible fuel. You can have it forever. You can go to the edges of the universe, or the multiverse, if you will, and still have plenty of fuel. You never run out of fuel. Well, they don't want to hear this because that's where their money's invested. They want to keep that idea quiet as much as they can. And if I had billions invested in petroleum, I'd probably be squirming and not wanting to hear something about an alternative that would last forever and not cost people anything. So it's the monetary system, in essence, that started on the idea of finding these things out and eventually putting ways and means, meters, etc., on to people's homes and so forth, and finding that they can sell this. They produce it with the dynamos, they produce it with generators, etc., etc. But we live in a natural sea of energy. There's energy everywhere. Every time the sun comes up in the morning, my God, there's so much energy. Photosynthesis, everything that takes place just from the rising of the sun, and it's the way it's been avoided. And I know they've tried with different techniques of capturing the sun with solar panels and so forth, but they're not going to the cause of what's producing the effects, and they're dealing with effects instead of causes.
Okay.
So, and the cause is magnetism, and if they go directly to the core and understand magnetism, it's just really simple. There's a positive and negative polarities, and these go on forever, and they are counter-rotating in their own vortexial mechanics, producing enormous amounts of energy that we're not even aware of. We're breathing energy all the time, and it can be used, and that's what our accumulator does, is accumulate the energy and then producing it back into the system. And we want to cooperate with the system. We've never created a greater resistance, even though they did shut us down several times. What we want to gradually introduce the technology of ether technology, if you will, so that people can gradually they can stay with their Maseratis or their Corvettes or even their horses. Amish still run around with horses, but there are some of us that would like to see spaceships come into being. They're long overdue. They were here at one time. You can go back into ancient histories and find them in the Varanas in India. You can find spaceships mentioned in different cultures forever if you go back far enough in time. So we just want to reintroduce them and get the energy flowing equally to everybody, so that everybody has the playing field will be level for everybody, and there will be no conglomerate or no monarchy to run the show. Everybody's on their own, but they have the ability to be very, very comfortable while they're creating their own environment, their own ways.
Yeah, equal opportunity, that's all we ask for. And like you said, the Bill Hicks quote, it's just a ride. They want to shut him up because we got millions invested in this ride. And, you know, the oil fields and the platforms and all that, they just do not want this technology to surface. And it's very evident. But the technology is there. It's just not being brought out, in my humble opinion. We're just going to take a break here, if that's okay with you. Wet your whistle there, take a break.
Wonderful. Okay.
Great. And we just want to let our listeners know, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com is the website here at Revolution Radio. We are 100% listener supported. You will not hear a commercial break. We are strictly 100% listener supported. We've got a wonderful chat room, a wonderful site here to keep you busy for days, a whole bunch of links, informative, very, very much intuitive information. We've got a lot of great links to sites, something like in our chat room right here, for instance, somebody has posted an X-flare. Earth orbiting satellites have just detected an X2 class solar flare. More to come. That's from solarham.com. So you've got like-minded chatters in the chat room here sharing information back and forth, and that's what we love here. It keeps it active. So do join us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. We've got in that chat room on the side there, we've got a great list of links, one of those being one of my favorite, the swag section. And if you'd like to help promote our show, Revolution Radio, you can buy a t-shirt, a wallet, a mug, and you can help support and promote the station at the same time. Very cool way of getting out there. We have a list of archives of our past shows. If you've missed something a couple weeks ago and you'd like to know, well, who was Tim's guest last week? Well, that was Brooks Agnew, and you can find that in our archive section for a nominal fee. And that archive gives you 6 months of free archives and albums from Hawk, the owner of the radio station's group. He has 3 or 4 albums in there for your enjoyment. We also have a schedule list. You can check that out for upcoming shows. Like I said, the store. We've got a library, a news link, survival documents, and like I said, 100% listener supported. So if you can, please come and join us in the chat room. Click that donate button because you will not hear commercials here. Strictly listener supported, all because of you. Yes, I'm talking to you, Tim Dolger, to you guys. Greatly appreciate it. You can also purchase banners if you'd like. There's space for sale for $50 a month. A gentleman, I think it posted, Love Your Children, and he's paying $50 for that. Greatly appreciate the support here. Nobody's making money. This is all for the bandwidth, and we want to stay on air to keep you live, keep you bringing the truth. And like I said, not corporate media pushed, and we like to keep it that way for the listeners. We keep the freedom of speech going here. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I am yours truly, Tim Dolger, going till 10 p.m. this evening when the Crow will come in for the market report. The daily market report starts at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 Central, and that goes for a half an hour. And this evening following the report is Dave Corso's show till midnight, and a very special evening this evening. Joey Diamond. He's got great intros. He's got great voice. He's a good man. He's coming on at 12 a.m. And I do not know how long he's going for, but it's going to be a special show. So do stay tuned all night here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Tim Dolger here, freedomslips.com. A phenomenal E.Ts show. New time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Thursdays. We were at 10 p.m., but I said, Hawk, I got to get to bed a little bit early. Can you fit me in at 8? And Hawk did so. So I greatly appreciate that. And please do join us at that website. And chat room is going crazy here. Like-minded folks, you'll have a great time. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And my guest this evening is Ralph Ring of Blue Star Enterprise. You can check out his website while you're listening to our show. It's a very good guest, very informative, a natural scientist, creative technician who has worked alongside Otis T. Carr, a protege of Nikola Tesla, investigating alternative technologies, one of which is being teleportation, which we do want to get into. Ralph, you there?
Yes. I'm
Great.
there.
Great. Like I said, we had a chat room that the questions have just been piling up, so I'm going to get to those if that's okay with you. And how about what if we open the lines for some callers? Is that okay?
Sure, that's wonderful.
All right, so that's what I'll do. And the callers for North America is 347-688-2902. That's 347-688-2902. Or as always on Skype, a free call. You can type in Freedom Screen and add us as a friend, and we'll accept the request, and you can call in and speak with my guest, Ralph Ring of Blue Star Enterprise. All right, a question here from our lovely chat room, our great supporters here. Ralph Ring, ever heard of Howard Johnson's motor?
Oh, sure. Of
course. We all have. Explain it, what it is.
Well, I just know of his work. There's been many people, and there's many people that have worked with magnetism, T. Thompson Brown, and scores and Breeden. There's so many people that have worked on these energies, and they get so far, and they seem to be running into the same stalemate as the rest of us, because the monetary system is so violently strong, and it's run by a system of fear. If people are afraid of losing their jobs, they're afraid of not supporting their family, then there's going to be a continuance of servitude in their lives. And actually, one has to be brave enough or courageous enough to stand the ground and go beyond fear and know that everything and anything is possible if you say so. And that means that everybody has the creative powers to create their own reality and live it as such, without the hindrance or the intimidation of a system that would like to keep them just quietly working away as like slaves. Excuse me.
Oh, Ralph?
So I do know, yes, and I don't know all of the details about the Johnson motors and so forth, but I do know. And there's Bandini motors. There's several several great, courageous attempts to work with magnetic energy, but it comes to a point when it gets into resonant frequencies, mysteriously the planning and zoning or somebody shows up and says, well, you can't do this, or you got to fill out these forms, and they're as thick as a dictionary, and it just slows things down, and eventually people would just go back into their caves and wait for people to change their consciousness, to become consciously aware of the need for change. We've got to change soon, or we're going to have the extinction of the human race.
Well, you had said it, and I live by that, is you have to stop taking a finger and pointing it and turn it around and start looking within. And once you start, opening that consciousness, you can arise to the level that you need to be in order for all this to come true. If we're stuck in that same rat race, in the same maze, we're not going to progress. And that's what we need to do. We need to, it's platforms like this and your website, Blue Star Enterprise, that gets the information out and lets people know that there is a place you can go to. We're letting the information out. It's here. We just have to run with it. We got to keep an open mind.
True.
Great.
So, in answer to your question, Howard Johnson, yes, I do know of him. I've never talked directly with, him or any of his people that he worked with, but I am familiar with his work.
Okay. That's great. We can go on. Now, it's been said that the Earth is expanding. Do you know about this theory, and how can we prepare for it?
Well, I'm not familiar with the theory of the Earth expanding.
Neither am I. They're just questions.
That's a good question. Although the collective consciousness of who and what we are, that means each one of us is part of a greater body, a consciousness that goes on forever. We've always been, we're here now, and we'll always be around because energy can't be created or destroyed, and that's who we are. So that energy field is collectively now expanding. It has to expand, and along with that, the manifestations of everything that we create, which is our awareness of what we call reality, which is really our creation of a reality, is really an illusion that we're creating, has to expand as we expand our consciousness. So globally or infinite to each of the cosmos, I suppose everything's expanding according to the consciousness. If they raise it or expand it far enough, everything has to follow suit.
Thank you for that, Ralph. Okay, does Ralph have any future predictions? It's a very broad statement, so are you winning the lottery tomorrow or what?
And I don't think I'd like to. I'm sorry, but this seems to be the case. I would rather see people wanting to help us build spaceships and get into the reality of raising the consciousness high enough to where they can realize it's already happening in certain dimensions. The spaceships are already their history. We're not aware of them because like we're not aware of how worms grow in the ground or how beetles have their habitats because we're not consciously aware of their dimensions. And likewise, even our own facilities, our own scientific facilities on this planet have gone in excess of what we know into alternatives. They have what's called black ops. They have levitating devices. They're now experimenting with teleportation and invisibility, et cetera, et cetera. They're on the fringes of ether technology, but they are not wanting to enter it because in the realms of what we're referring to as ethers, weapons are obsolete, violence is obsolete. There's no way you can have an accident in magnetic fields. There's no way you can have a crash. There's no money to be made because when you're operating on a love principle, when you love your work, you love your job, you love yourself, and you love your friends, everything just falls right into place, and things open up and happen just magically, or I should say mystically, which deals with magnetism as well. So I forgot the question.
Oh, that's okay. Let me just undo that. Okay, let me do that. Undo that again. Experiment. Okay, no. So we'll just go on to the next one there, because they just keep piling up. So we will not fall short. I guarantee it. Okay.
And I'll brief my answers unless you need more. I'll be glad to elaborate on them. But I'll give you a brief conceptual idea of what I'm talking about, and then I can get into details if necessary.
No, you just talk away. This is all about Ralph Ring at. Let me pull up your website. I went into a little section in your website here, bluestarenterprise.com. I went down to your video section about John Hutchinson, and so that would lead into my next question. Are any of your experiments in any way related to the Hutchinson effect?
Yes, but in different in different dimensions. He's dealing with electromagnetism, and he is definitely in the field of magnetics and vortex mechanics, etc. But he's on a slightly different level than the one that we're on. We've gone beyond the physical production stages of operation, I should say, I guess. That being, let me see how I can explain this. There's the F-117 fighter jet that was produced back in the, I think, 40s, no, not the 40s, maybe the 60s or 70s, and where the helmets that the pilots were using had diodes that were directly connected to the skull, and the brain impulses would operate the craft. They didn't have to have moving. They didn't have to have a steering wheel, so to speak. And now, since then, they've got into the Aurora and other classified technologies that border again on ether technology, but they're still lacking the synergy of allowing things to just happen. They are still using force to make them happen. So when you want to turn left, you have to say left and right and upside down and so forth. Whereas in the ether technology that we were using, and I'll tell you that when we get into the craft and the teleportation, I'll get into that a little more. It's pure consciousness. You have only to resonate with a certain field, like the hummingbirds do it too, but the bumblebee, and you can change the results. So you can if anybody has noticed the patterns and the pictures and the diagrams and so forth of our craft, there's no ignition switch, there's no pilot control, there's no steering wheels. It's done with consciousness. And we can get deeper into that as we go, if you like. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out.
Go ahead. Let's get into that.
Oh, all right.
They're making vehicles now. They were advertising that you can soon make vehicles with thought now. Like you could take a turn with just thinking about it. So they're slowly introducing that. I seen that the other day. So it's interesting that you speak about that.
Yeah, and it's actually it's not a new technology. It's been around for quite a while, but it hasn't been used at all. But it being consciously aware that, okay, I'm going to go way deep into the field here for a moment, then I can back out zone, so people don't hang up on us. But we are a collective consciousness. We are energy. That's all we are. It's an endless form of energy, a mass, if you will, of energy. And we are collectively everywhere at the same time. Yeah. Give a small demonstration of that right now. If I were to say, let's go to Hawaii, let's go down and get a plane. Oh, we got to get a taxi first and go to the airport. Oh, did you forget your ticket, etc. We got to go through all the details of getting from point A to point B by conventional means. That's linear ways of doing things. Or you can use your conscious awareness, and if you use it in the proper way, you can actually teleport to where you want to go. And a demonstration of that right now is when I say Hawaii, and you can see the white sands, you can see the green grass, you can see the palm trees, and you can see the blue and undulating water. It's in everybody's mind simultaneously. It's the speed of thought, which is far and above the speed of light. And when you are aware of that and you let go of your present identity, which holds us here by in a sense a state of fear, afraid of changing. When you let go of that and you really want to go somewhere else, and I'm putting this in very linear terms, you can teleport. You can go from one place to the other, and the consciousness goes there, and then getting the idea of a body there, because the body is produced in nanoseconds. It doesn't, like everything else in our illusion out here, it's all produced instantly. The minute we open our eyes, we're creating. Every instant we are creating our environment. It doesn't really exist except in our own ideas. So when it comes to teleporting your body somewhere, which we call a body, you don't have to think about exporting all the organs, the liver, the heart. You're just transporting the energy. And then when you're, for a very good reason, when you're at point B and you wish to rematerialize, if you will, you simply slow the vibratory rate down, because it's a very, very high frequency. Teleportation is very, very high frequency. You slow the vibratory rate down to the density of what we call matter, and voila, you're there. I know that's gonna, I don't know.
It's gonna rattle a few.
But it's all true, and I'll when we get into the craft, I'll explain it, because I've been there, done that, and I'll explain it to you.
Well, explain it to us. We've got you till 10 p.m. here, another 37 minutes, so just talk away. We've got the questions, so they're there, and feel free to elaborate.
Well, if there's any other questions on it right now, I'll be glad to work my way into it and explain it to you.
Well, no, what you were going on. There's just more questions not relevant to that particular subject.
Let's see. Okay, when we got together, I'll go directly to how we teleported.
Okay.
When I got together with Carr and his entourage, we had facilities based in Apple Valley, California, which is next to Victorville, Barstow, Southern California. The Understanding Group found a facility for us. It was called the Osbrick factory, and it was abandoned, and we were allowed to take it over. So we went down and started immediately starting to put things together, our alternatives and ideas, and wanted to get some prototypes made so that we could introduce them somehow to people, to show, kind of a show and tell, to show people, there's more here than you realize. We can move from a point A to point B without worrying about deflection or resistance or anything else. And the way we do that is consciousness. When we finally we were building some prototypes, we got a small model made up. I had experiments with putting I better not get into that yet. But we needed a manufacturer, so we contacted Wayne Aho contacted General Motors and asked them to send a rep out that we had an alternative idea for transportation and habitation we'd like to talk to them about. They sent a rep out with with an entourage of physicists and engineers. And we met at the Riverside Hotel, I believe it was, or somewhere in Riverside, California. And Gar just had a little suitcase with this little, we had a...
Can you speak more into the mic? Sorry, we're losing you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Is this better?
Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful.
Okay, sorry. Anyhow, we'd gone as far as we could. We've already tested our prototypes to find, yes, this is working. We want to get into production. So we called GM. They came out. A rep was there. We took out a small prototype that we had and put it on his desk, and it levitated right on his desk. And these engineers pulled out all kinds of measuring devices, asked us to take our jackets off, etc. They thought we were wired or bugged or had remote. And Carr said, "No, we're just using our consciousness. That's all. There are moving parts in this one, but eventually there won't be because we'll get into solid state circuitry and so forth. But right now, we're suspending the thing called gravity, and we're operating in a magnetic force field. And so the rep, after hearing the reports from the engineers, they don't seem to be wired. They don't seem to have any way of operating this car. Said it's simple. We're operating with our consciousness, and we want to produce these things. And the rep was very, very abrupt. He said, "No, there's no way we're going to do this. You're using magnetism. There goes one part of the monetary system, and we've got hundreds of thousands of people that we employ, taking home paychecks that support their families and kids and so forth. And you guys are outlaws." And the upshot was, he said just before we left, "If you guys put them up, we'll shoot them down. We don't need your technology. We don't want to go there." Yeah. So we knew our cover was blown there, and then we knew we'd be, really psyched out by different facilities that didn't want us to continue. But we had a 45-foot craft just about ready to go. And I was privileged enough because I was buddies with Carr, even though I was nothing more than a gopher at times. But we understood the same natural laws. And I was with two other engineers, and I was privileged enough to go through this experiment. And what it was, we got on board. There was a giant crystal in the center. I think a lot of this is on the website too. So yeah. Well,
so now for our listeners, you're talking about being on this craft, this shaped craft, and you're going to talk about that.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
All right. Just want to let our listeners know. Okay. Good.
Okay.
Because I've been pushing this. I've been like, this is a cool experiment, and I'm so glad to have Ralph Ring on. And I just pushed you all week here in our chat room, so I'm looking forward to this. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, Carr explained, that in what we're calling ether technology, time and space do not exist. This is created by a linear understanding of time and space. We create it as a measurement for one reason or another, from point A to point B and so forth. So he said, what we're going to do, we're going to get on board this craft, and the engineers have gone downrange about 10 miles and spotted a place that we want to take the craft to, and then we want you to, when you're there, you'll get out and explore and then get back on and come back. And we thought, well, that's cool. That sounds neat. He says, well, you probably won't remember any of it. So anyway, long story short, I got on board with these other two engineers, and there was a giant crystal in the center of the craft. It was in a kind of a gyroscopic harness, and there was a laser, very, very intensive, bright laser coming up from the bottom through the crystal that changed its colors into the 7 known colors of the spectrum, and beyond. It just went from infrared to ultraviolet, different colors, and eventually arriving on the color of aquamarine. And Carr had explained that they had gone down, the engineers had gone down range and measured the field, the destination, the target field, as related to the color and light spectrum that would equate to the color of aquamarine. So that just happened to be where we were going. So he said, when it will get to the color of aquamarine, and just he says, when you get on board, clear your mind, clear your brain. Don't just go to sleep. I don't care what you do, but don't think about anything, because that'll short circuit the experiment. Just clear your brain and observe the feelings and the sights and sound, although there wasn't much sound to be heard, of the experiment. So we did. Sat there. The whole inside of the ship eventually turned to beautiful aquamarine. And
Ralph, you there? Oh, brother. Do apologize, Revolution Radio. Joey, we're calling everybody. Sorry about that. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. The phone got and everybody got knocked off at the same time.
Hi, Tim, is that you?
Yeah, that's me. The phones got transferred, and immediately as they did, the first call I accepted without even allowing me to pull them in, it just dropped everybody. So I do apologize for those who were trying to call in. Feel free to call right back here and speak with my guest, Ralph. We've got a few more minutes with him, a better part of a half an hour. And we do have one caller here. Jim, you there?
Well, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds great. The phones just got transferred over, so if you wanted to call in via phone, you're more than welcome as well.
Okay, I am, first of all, let me say I'm delighted to have Ralph here because he's exploring a lot of the ideas that we've been talking about on the chat since we first got this going several months ago. Shared consciousness is going to be a delight, and I think we are seeing the precursor of it occur in the kind of communities that we're developing using the internet, using that the superior ability to communicate. But let me call back in, okay?
Yeah, actually, you sound like your nose is plugged. You sound sick.
Well, it's because I haven't messed around with this headset that much and set it up right.
Oh, you got it in your nose. Okay, take it out of your nose and call us right back.
This is a delight. I would like to make one more comment, and then I'll call back. But it's that reality. Oh, hi, Ralph.
Hi, Jim. I'm hearing you.
Oh, this is so much fun. I was thinking you might possibly know Adair, but I was thinking that reality follows thought. I've been experimenting with that quite a bit lately. Yeah. So I'll call you guys right back, okay?
Great, sounds good.
You mentioned Adair. Were you talking about David Adair?
Yeah, so you know what David's doing, right?
Oh, man, yeah, sure. He's a buddy. Yeah,
can we
it's the same thing with consciousness.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Call right back with your phone. We'll talk about Adair.
I love you both.
All right, Jim. How about? Great. Yeah, that was one of the questions that Jim had posted. So that was actually the next question that came up in the chat room. But as he is calling back, do you think the ley lines are an essential part of the ether?
The ley lines are the ethers. It deals with sacred geometry. You have to know exactly where the ley lines are in order, all the cathedrals in ancient times were built on ley lines, and you notice they're still standing. The Roslyn Chapel, for one, is just as old as the hills and beyond, and the deterioration of anything around the chapel is very, very minimal. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and that's because you're not offering a resistance. It's similar to putting a sail up to the wind. When you put a sail up to the wind, you've created a tremendous resistance, and that sail will eventually be torn apart by the forces of the wind unless you know how to operate the sail. So when you build on ley lines, you align yourself with the natural forces that are flowing through and around in the earth, and the resistance is gone to, in many cases, almost to total zero, to almost a 0 point. And so the resistance, the wear and tear, the disintegration of things is minimal. Same thing as building a square house and exposing it to a windstorm. The square house will probably blow away, where a dome will stay intact for, a lot longer.
Yeah. If we start working with Mother Nature, like you promote, we'll get a lot more out of it, and that's true. And then we do have Jim back, so exactly. Let's get on to the Adair subject. I had no idea who this gentleman was.
Well, Adair was a rocketeer that it was an amateur, also a hot rod engine builder as a kid before his dad had built racing engines, right?
Yes, uh-huh.
So what he did is he started experimenting with rockets, and he got some really good ones going, as a kid, as a pre-teenager. Got some big ones going. Hornswoggled a senator, I believe, into helping him finance a really extremely novel and interesting series of rockets that he built. And he was using fusion containment and developed a rocket that hit something like 28,000 miles per hour in something like 3 seconds or 4 seconds. What a hoot!
And he was just a kid. He was just one of our neighborhood kids playing around with rockets. And of course the powers that be, I don't want to say government, because there's more behind the government than we know of that's operating the government. But the powers that be got kind of wind of it and decided to find out how, when, why, and what. And go ahead, Jim. I didn't mean to chirp in there, but
no.
Well, it's sort of fun. It's a great story. Did he tell you about when they made him shoot the rocket? His first magnetic containment bottle.
Caller, just hold on. We're going to get to you. Sorry, Jim.
Oh, okay. Well, what Adair was doing was he was making a containment bottle for a fusion reaction. They made him land it in Groom Lake. So he flies out to Groom Lake, thinking it's going to be a typical fairly wet period of the lakes in that area, right? We used to use them for racing. So he gets there and he finds, guess what? Area 21. So they land, scoot him into the middle, what do they call those things? With the big buildings. And the whole floor drops on this thing, and they scoot him into a side path, right? And Ralph, if your voice is recovered, why don't you? I've tried to describe what he found to the gang there, and I'd like you to try to describe it to him.
Well, I think if we back up a little bit, he did fire a rocket, and he was guided by government rocketeers, I suppose you'd call them. I don't know, scientists.
Well, you know who he talked to? He was hanging out with von Braun, but that other guy, the guy that was in charge of the V2s and 3s in Germany,
von Braun.
Yeah, the really nasty guy. Yeah.
But he excelled way beyond Braun's even dreamed of, and he did land in at Area 51, and they flew him there to find out more about how he could do this. And he sensed, he used his intuition, really, or sixth sense, that these guys were not all together for the development of humanity. They wanted to kind of curtail this and
well, they talked him into going down and examining that very alien-looking, monocoque, totally seamless power generation that was using possibly a black hole for its power source. Did he describe that to you?
Well,
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, synergizing with the. Okay, well, he had to dismantle he had to blow up his rocket so that it wouldn't be, taken over at that time. Then they shuttled him over to to an adjacent park called Papoose or Groom Lake, and went down several stories down underground, and they showed him this partly damaged spaceship, alien spaceship that they had captured or got there, and they wanted to know through reverse engineering how this thing operated, because it didn't have any controls, it didn't have anything that looked like our conventional craft at all. So he could put his hand on it and he would synergize with it, and it would actually talk to him because he understood magnetism and the essence of energy so well.
Yeah, it was communicating with him, right?
Pardon?
It was communicating with him, or trying to. It was trying to establish some communication because he was sensitive to what it was possible.
Right. Right, and so he was realizing that he was synergizing with actually a living creature, and as our craft eventually, if we get that far in the conversation, I explained to you, we had to love our craft like we loved ourselves, or the dang thing wouldn't operate for us. Everything operates on a higher vibration, which is called put a label of love on it, and so he loved his work. Adair was just a natural scientist, and because he loved the natural laws and everything, he was able to communicate. And he found out that this technology was far in advance of where we were at that time. And
well, hello. My name is Marilyn. I love Richard Wormballs. Well, hello.
I do apologize for that, Ralph.
Well, that's okay.
Anyway, what we do is we get avid fans here that call in and like to disrupt the phone line, so I do apologize for that.
Oh, that's okay.
Continue your thought. We will not be taking calls again. Go ahead.
Oh, anyway, so that's David Adair, and I believe we've got a spot on our website for him. If anybody cares to look him up, it's well worth the visit because he'll explain the rockets and the rocket, and his knowledge of advanced, and it was ether technology that he was dealing with, although labels are labels, and so you can throw them around anywhere. But he was dealing in vibrations far above the current understandings. And he's still going, as far as I know. He's doing different things now. But do you know, Tim, what he's doing now?
Not a clue. I've been too caught up with my dogs. I haven't been concentrating on every aspect of it. But we do have more questions here. We're going for another 16 minutes. Get a laugh out of people who are trying to disrupt the conversation like that. So we had Jim that when he had called in, he got knocked off there. So when we do...
Oh, he got knocked off. Okay.
Yeah, he got knocked off. So do apologize for that. But this is the phenomenal E.Ts, so I'll ask an extraterrestrial question if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, so scientists experimented a lot with zero-point energy, and in my opinion, E.Ts perfected it. Do you believe our galactic friends had any influence on this technology?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. They're always, as far as they can go, there is a Galactic Pact's regulations concerning intervention in any planetary or even personal affairs, unless warranted with the threat of extinction. And now we are on the verge of extinction, and so now we're getting plenty of help from what's commonly known as E.Ts, or actually they're not as far away as we think they are, because they're in amongst and with us all the time. And when you are coming from your truth and honesty from yourself, you're apt to run into one, because they don't deal with theories or ideas. They deal with strictly truth. And if you're truthful, you'll run into them. Anyhow, that's my take on it. We've worked with many people that seem to come from beyond the stars.
Exactly. Greatly appreciate that, Ralph. More questions here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. My guest, Ralph Ring of BlueStarEnterprise.com. feel free, welcome to visit his site. Check it out. It's got great information, as does our website, freedomslips.com. And this is the Phenomenal E.Ts here, Revolution Radio. Tim Dalger, the host, here with Ralph Ring. So do check him out. We have him for another 15 minutes. More questions here from our chat room, and I do appreciate everyone contributing as they have been. There's questions that we will not get to, but you can always visit his website and pop some questions in the members section there. So with no further ado, we'll get to some more. Have you heard of the rod and coil? If so, what do you think about it? Is it a viable concept that can be applied to anti-gravity technologies?
Oh yes, oh yeah. I have a friend that's working with that now. I'm not in depth familiar with it because we're working in a different area, but I think it is, as it will lead them, they'll get eventually back into magnetism. It does have a very, 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 very high potential to it. So that's about all I can say about it because I'm not, directly connected with it.
Okay, great. That's okay. More questions here. Did the Bush family steal Tesla's ideas?
Well, okay. I have to put it in this context because at this point, to really either give a lot of people satisfaction or really throw them into the loop. The fact is that there is no wrongdoers. There is no black hats and white hats. It's all us. It's all we. We have all the potential of every atrocity we could ever think of within us, and it's how we use that energy. It's all energy, and it's how we use it that counts. And when we have a projection of some alternative energy trying to slow down or stop or change the system that's contrary to the benefit of all mankind, we are very, very definitely aware of it, and we go into a state of anger or fear or doubt, and that short circuits our systems of knowing who and what we are. We have the ability to work on that internally instead of externally. So when that idea of people, places, or things seems to steal or take or stop projects, there's something going on within us that's allowing that to occur, and we're projecting that, and we're sensing or seeing that externally in the illusion that we're creating. So that in frames of reference, that's a very important, if I didn't say anything else, that's the most important thing I'm going to say tonight, is frames of reference. Everything is true. Everything is real, and everything is good. But you have to be able to get high enough in your consciousness to realize that. In other words, wars are good because of what they teach us, that atrocities, killing, murder, and so forth are not where we want to be. Nope. And if we learn our lesson from wars, there will never be another war within ourselves and within our projection, within our illusion. So, aside from the linear projection that it might be people, places, or things that are stopping us, it's really our internal mechanisms that's trying to balance itself. We've been aware of an imbalance in our system for quite a while, and now we need to rebalance in order to realize who we are. And there's no longer a state of learning necessary. It's a state of remembering who and what we are.
Good point.
And we are divine in nature. We are created beings. We have no beginning. We have no ending. And if we know that and stand on our principle, there's a movie called Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and that illustrates my point completely. When he comes to an abyss where the bridge is fallen down, the bad guys are after him. He's got to go rescue the girl, or I forget what the premise was, and there's nothing there but a 1,000-foot drop. But he relies totally on his intuition and steps off, and there was something there. And that's what we have to do in our consciousness, to go beyond the fear and the doubt. And that produces No matter what, it'll never let you down. Your intuition will never ever let you down.
No.
But it's not easy. If you've lived in the fear base for a while, you're not going to want to go there. You're not going to want to hear anything about it. But if you do it, you'll find it's quite simple, and there's always something there to catch you. You're not going to fall.
No. That's the intuition. That's the gut feeling.
Yeah, gut feeling, yes, trust it. Because your brain is here in a third dimensional, it's a computer that runs the body. That's its whole job. Third dimensional projection, which is the body, water vessel. And it has an optimum capacity, and that optimum capacity doesn't exceed to the ethers at all. It just is concerned with is the liver operating at its pace and its function that it's supposed to be doing, or the heart or the kidneys, etc. That's all it's interested in. You approach the brain with ether technology, and it just laughs and says, "Oh, that's airy-fairy," or "that doesn't exist," or because it doesn't. In frames of reference, yes, it does, because everything changes. The Heisenberg principle, the first, observational principle of when you observe an object, you can also change it. So you're never going to get an absolute observation of an object, and that's the same with all energy. The glass I'm holding in my hand as I speak in this moment is not the glass I'm holding in this moment. It changes. The whole molecular structure changes in nanoseconds because we're producing it with our minds. And we have the capacity to create a beautiful, wonderful world here. And we're not using it. We're living in a sewer of fear and doubts. And until we take that step and be strong enough to say, okay, boss, I've had it, I quit, and knowing that the family's counting on your paycheck, guess what? Tomorrow somebody will call you and give you a job you never expected. I mean, it'll always happen. It'll never let you down. Maybe not exactly the way you think. You think of a new car, it may be a while, but it might give you a good form of transportation until you get that Maserati or whatever. But
that's what some are going for, those Maseratis. Yeah.
No.
That's okay. We've got 6 more minutes with you and more questions that we probably will not be able to finish, but I pulled out some interesting ones. Maybe you can elaborate on them if you will.
Sure.
Okay, great. So can a ferrofluid supercooled to near absolute zero and rotated at a high velocity with a superconducting coil wrapped around a nano-engineered torus that holds the ferrofluid produce anti-gravitic effects?
Of course. Yes. And I say that in the simplest of terms because I in the academic terms, I have no idea what you're talking about. But in truth, yes, and there's now superconductors on the net that you can look up on rotating magnetic fields that are just zinging up and down and around and upside down. So the answer to that question has to be yes, if that fits with the question. Yes. Everything is true in frames of reference. So.
Great. It gets funny here towards the end. I love it. Great. Okay. A few years ago, there were spirals of something in Norway skies. Of course, we've all seen it. Could this be a form of CERN atom smasher creating a black hole?
Ooh. I suppose it could. I really don't know, Tim. I don't have any direct thing. To me, it was a phenomenon that was provoking thought, and that's a very good thing because when people start thinking about other things than themselves and start projecting into what's going on, then we have a chance at the future. Otherwise, we have to stay in our comfort zone, in our box, and just, relate to it as any definition or label we care to put on it. And I don't really know what that phenomenon was, but I'm very excited about it because it was something that woke a lot of people up.
Okay. This is a pretty interesting question. I like this one. It came up from a certain somebody called Ekin Naklastos in our chat room. It's a pretty long name, and maybe they know how to pronounce it a little better. But great questions from them. You mentioned vortex mechanics. Are you by chance using vortex mechanics to conduct your research? If not, what type of maths are you using to conduct your research?
It's all vortex. We don't use anything but the concept, the understanding, and the use of vortex. Everything grows in vortexual motion. If you look at a tree from the base up, you'll see that all of the limbs go out spiraling up to the top of the tree. Everything spirals, including us. We just don't realize it because we're in a linear consciousness. But the vortex is everything, and as it accelerates, you can create what's called portals. You can actually there's experiments being done now by accelerating the vortexual understandings and motions to where they shift their consciousness from one dimension to the other and back again. So it's a very useful understanding to know what vortices are. They're counter-rotating, they create a vacuum. It's like you enter a jug of water down the sink, and you'll spend all day while the water was strangling for air, or you can spin that bottle. You can just spin it counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere, and that water will shoot out of there like a rocket. I mean, it'll come out 10 times faster. And that's creating a vacuum in the center of the spin, which is your if you know anything about Victor Schomburger, he experimented with water and vortices. You have an implosion and explosion that's happening consistently together. But we're working with an explosional environment instead of an implosion one, so we're having a lot of problems with things. But I don't know if I'm getting. Does that answer anything? I don't know.
That's great, and that will bring us to the end of our interview here with Ralph Ring. Any final thoughts, Ralph?
Well, yeah. Just I would say to your audience, instead of fearing and doubting yourself and what's being said by people like me, look into it. That's all you have to do. Just prove me wrong, prove me upside down, prove me whatever you like. But look into yourself. Look into the truth. Because the truth is the truth. It'll never change. It's the same as the belief system. You can be taught to believe one thing and somebody will cause you to disbelieve it. But when you know you have to go to the bathroom, you're hungry, you're thirsty, nobody can change that. So get to know who you are and what you are. And you're an infinite being with incredible consciousness. If you put it to use, we can get out of this slush pond we're in and get to a very dimensional change from the Flintstones to the Jetsons. We can get off the ground and flying, or beyond flying.